Howdy all, welcome back to the Kohler project. I think the first video where I left off, I had just gotten the head pulled off and was unsure exactly what I was going to do with the valves. I was going to lap them, and I don't remember in the first video, I turned the engine over to get the valves up, and I could see this number one had a really big nick in the valve seat, so I wanted to lap the valves, but lapping never would have taken care of that. And there were some other issues. When you do something with valves in the head, overhead valves, your valves are all up in the air where you can work on them, so these are basically upside down, and without having the engine on its side at least, it's pretty hard. But this was number one. I did get the valve keepers out and got the valve out of the block. The actual seat, the face of the valve didn't look too bad. The seat, like I said, it was pretty bad, so I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. Buddy I worked with, he had the old Sioux valve grinding kit at home, so I borrowed that. Found a couple stones that fit the seat. I know what the book tells you as far as degrees, angle that it should be, but I wasn't sure what his were. Did get it cleaned up pretty good. It lowered the valve down in the seat pretty good, but it still worked out. Getting the keepers back in there working upside down was pretty rough. I did manage to get it though, and then I ran through all the valves, and they weren't too far off. They used to make wrenches, big long thin wrenches like that, used to be called tappet wrenches, because you had to get in there and you needed a thin one, so you just basically you get it in there, hold it on the lifter, and the threads, this is basically just a 1/2-inch bolt that goes in there. It's like an interference fit on the threads. There's no lock nuts, they're a real tight thread, so you just back them out or screw them down in to adjust your clearances. Like I said, I did have a book on this that gave you your clearances. It was 8 and 11 thousandths. Anybody that knows about engines, you know when they give you clearance, your bigger clearance is always on the exhaust valve because of the extra heat. But normally the tops of these valves, I said before, they're always flat and no writing on them. That would have had they used to make a little, it was almost like a hand drill with a crank on it, and the end of it had they're different replaceable ends that would go down in these, but that's the part I was trying to find, something couldn't. Well, I just happened to find this little device. I'm thinking this had a T-handle on the back of it, and I think this was a little tool for taking cleats out of the bottom of sports shoes, or in particular golf shoes. So I checked it, and it fit down in there, so it lost the T-handle so I could put it in the drill. So I did that and lapped them in, and like I said before, I just ran the valves up till they were open, put some compound in them, lowered them, turned the engine around till they came back down on their seats, and did it like that. It's not really the right way to do it because you have all your spring pressure still on them, but I think in this case it's going to work out okay. And when you figure out where your valves are, just to make sure they're both closed, you can just go around in the firing order, which I did. And if you don't know, I mean, most 90%, other than some of the new engines, an inline engine, whether it's 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder. You have 2 different pistons on the same throw. I'll turn this up. So you know, as you'll see as I turn this over, when the intake, the exhaust valve closes and the intake starts to open, your piston on that side is at top dead center. It's just starting the intake. So let me go over here and run this up a little bit with a screwdriver. There's a hole down in here you can get on the flywheel or the fan. We'll just do this. It's hard to see, but you can sort of see the valve closing, and now the intake is starting to come up. So this is at top dead center. It's starting the intake. So the other one, you know, is just on your compression stroke. So that's, you know, these ones are going to be closed. So I ran through them, and then you just follow your firing order. I know it's kind of, if you're not familiar how that works, it sounds kind of goofy, but it works. So I'm going to try and get this head back on there. I was hoping I'd be a little bit further, but this is kind of just going to be a part 2. And I think I'm going to try reusing. This had the old Victor copper head gasket in it. These things are pretty resilient. You can a lot of times use them over again. I got a can of copper coat. I'm going to spray everything down real good and put that back on there. So let me get my phone mounted here where I need to be, and we'll see if we can kind of get things sort of back together here. I'm just going to spray this copper coat all over everything, and then I have some oil in the cylinders will help me wipe it back off the cylinders. If they're right on the top of the piston, it isn't that big of a deal, but these 2 cylinders that are down, I wipe them off a little bit and put a little bit more oil. I coated the oil in there a little bit. Put a little bit more oil down in there, just a little lubrication. Really could have waited, because I think I need to put the head gasket on there, then coat it again. Kind of supposed to wait till this tacks up a little bit. I guess it is. Yeah, we'll wipe this cylinder out again. Like I said before, I didn't want to get real carried away of how much time and money I was putting into this. The cylinders are wore, so I don't know if it'll run or not. Just a neat little project. they're not old enough to be really desirable, and they're too new, the generators. I mean, you got 500 pounds worth of generator, probably more than that, the way everything sits, and for the amount of wattage that generator puts out nowadays, you can go to the store and pick one up and carry it out one-handed for what the different amount of power. So I don't even know if the generator works, but we'll find out. It would be a cool little engine, even if the generator doesn't work. If you get the generator off and can get something hooked up to the back end of it. Cool little engine if it runs to repurpose for something. Okay, let's set the head down on there. I had put some high temp anti-seize on these threads. I mean, they came apart, you just noticed in the first video, came apart pretty easy. Most all this stuff does come apart, just the better steel that was used back in those days as far as bolts. I'm going to leave the two off of this piece there with the water neck on it, just till I get a gasket made. There's enough bolts in here that I can get it held down good enough. They're just going to spin these down with the gun. There was probably I know that I did see a torque pattern in the book for that sequence, but as long as you start in the center and work back and forth to your outer edges. It usually gets you out of trouble. Torqued up here at about 38 foot-pounds, close to it anyhow. I just go back and forth as I'm getting a little bit more pressure on it here till I get the final ones. And if you're doing this, and it's nice to have a paint stick or something you can mark these so you don't lose track of where you're at, if your paint stick works. And you can go back over them just to make sure everything. Usually these older ones like that, they don't loosen up a whole lot. Especially with the tin gasket, the older style gaskets with the more like gasket material, sometimes will give a little bit, but okay, well, that's probably about as far as I'm gonna get today. I wanna let that copper coat tack up pretty good and get sealed. I'll make a gasket for this water spout and put that on before we do anything else. And I gotta make a couple gaskets for, like I said before, that carburetor that was on it wasn't the original one. The carburetors that were on these are like hen's teeth finding one, and if you do, it's gonna be way more money than I wanna put into this. I may even try running it on propane. It was trying to fire on propane before, but due to the leakage of the valves, you could see the propane pushing back out the carburetor when you turn it over. And I got a big roll of cork gasket material. I'll make another gasket for that. I'll probably leave it on till I get it running, if it runs, just to see if there's what kind of oil flows up in there. It'll probably splash a little bit, but so for now, that's the end of part 2, and hope you enjoyed that. I always enjoy getting down here and doing some stuff when I get a chance, even though I don't get a chance to do the fun projects all the time. But hope you like that. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and likes, and stay tuned for, hopefully, part 3 will be the will it start video. So thanks again for watching. Catch y'all later.